All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're breaking down a concept that honestly shapes our entire lives. What truth actually is. It's something we all think we have a handle on, but the source material for this explainer presents truth in a way that, well, it pretty much challenges everything our modern world tells us.
So let's just start with the big one, the central question. What is truth? I mean, we live in a world where the answer to that seems more complicated than ever, right? It feels like truth is constantly being debated or redefined, or sometimes just dismissed altogether. You've definitely heard this before. You've probably even said it. This phrase really is the anthem of our times. It basically frames truth as just a personal opinion, something totally subjective and relative. And while that's a convenient idea, it's the exact opposite of the argument our source is making.
And here is the total game changer. The entire argument hinges on this one statement from Jesus. Notice, he didn't say, "I'll teach you the truth," or "Here's a list of truths." He said, "I am the truth." Now, what's so wild about this claim is that it completely shifts truth from being an idea or a philosophy to being a person.
So if truth is a person, then knowing the truth isn't just about collecting facts or, winning an argument on the internet. It's about a relationship. And this is the core idea. Truth becomes about reliability, faithfulness, and stability, something you can actually build your life on.
The source uses this brilliant analogy of building a house. Think about it. You can have the most beautiful house, but if that foundation is cracked, it's all coming down eventually. So many of us build our lives on these shifting foundations like our reputation or our career success or money. But those things are just unstable. The argument here is that a relationship with the person of truth is the only unshakable foundation there is.
But to really get a grip on truth, we also have to understand its opposite, deception. So where do lies actually come from? The source traces it all the way back to the very beginning, to a really subtle and honestly strategic starting point.
Deception rarely starts with some huge, obvious lie. It's almost always a small distortion, a tiny little question designed to create doubt, like, did God really say? The source compares this to a plane that's just 1 degree off course when it takes off. It seems totally insignificant at first, right? But over a long journey, that 1 degree means it lands in a completely different country. That tiny deviation leads to a massively different destination.
So what drives us to make that 1 degree turn? The source argues it's almost always fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of losing something, fear of the consequences, fear of what other people are going to think. And this fear can even become a generational pattern. Abraham lied about his wife because he was afraid, and then, years later, his son Isaac did the exact same thing. These patterns just get passed down until somebody decides to break the cycle by choosing truth.
So let's look at a really powerful case study from the source material that shows the long-term cost of deception, the story of Jacob. This isn't just about telling a simple lie. It's about the crushing burden of living with a false identity. Okay, so here's the setup. Jacob's father, Isaac, is old. He's blind, and he's ready to give this massive, life-defining blessing to his firstborn son, Esau. But his mother, Rebekah, comes up with this whole plan for Jacob to steal it. She orchestrates the entire thing, even dressing Jacob in animal skins to trick his father.
So Jacob walks into the tent, and his blind father asks this critical, penetrating question, "Who are you?" It's the dramatic moment of truth, or in this case, the moment of the lie. The entire future of their family is hanging on Jacob's answer.
And Jacob lies. He says, "I am Esau, your firstborn." He gets the blessing, sure, but he completely loses his true identity in the process. Then, decades later, after living a life shaped by this lie, he has an encounter with God, who asks him the very same question. And this time he finally confesses, "My name is Jacob."
And here's the crucial point. This wasn't a one-time thing. Jacob lived with the consequences of that lie for over 20 years. He had to flee his family, he ended up being deceived by his own uncle, and he carried the weight of that lie the whole time. It wasn't until he was finally honest before God that his real identity was restored.
Okay, so this brings us to the solution. When our own deceptions are exposed, it can feel just awful. But the source material introduces this idea of the Spirit of Truth, whose whole purpose isn't to shame us, but to heal us.
The analogy they use is a surgeon. A surgeon has to uncover a wound, right? They have to clean it out to prevent infection. It might sting for a moment, but that exposure is absolutely necessary for healing. The Spirit of Truth works the same way, exposing the lies, not to embarrass us, but to actually heal us.
And this so brilliantly illustrates the difference between conviction and condemnation. Condemnation is that feeling of shame that just pushes you away from God. But conviction, according to the source, is what the Spirit of truth brings. It's a feeling that actually draws you closer to God for healing and restoration. One pulls you in, the other pushes you away.
Now, for the final, and maybe my favorite, takeaway from all this. It comes from the disciple who actually prompted this whole discussion about the way, the truth, and the life in the first place, the disciple Thomas.
Okay, here's a fascinating little detail. Thomas's full name was Thomas Didymus. Thomas comes from the Aramaic word for twin, and Didymus is the Greek word for twin. So his name literally means twin the twin. How weird is that?
Isn't that interesting? The twin disciple is the one who's famous for his doubt, right? He's the one who voiced the questions that maybe a lot of us feel deep down. Perhaps he's called a twin because his skepticism is a mirror, a twin, of our own struggle to believe without seeing.
And how did Jesus, the person of truth, respond to Thomas's doubt? Did he reject him? Did he shame him for asking questions? No way. He invited him closer. He said, "Reach your finger here." He literally welcomed the investigation. And that leaves us with this one last provocative thought. What if truth, when you understand it as a person instead of just a set of rules, isn't afraid of our honest questions? What if, instead of pushing us away, our doubts are actually an invitation to come closer and investigate for ourselves?